Derek's going to put the link to my slides in the chat so y'all can access them. And then as you're accessing them, these are clickable links so you guys can navigate to where you need to go in the future if you're trying to see what the heck we talked about today. And I give you all some extra slides in the background as well for further resources for you all that we can't cover everything today, unfortunately. So, all right, so just what are the goals of collaborative research? What are we all trying to do here? The basic goals that I could come up with were accuracy. We're all trying to prevent errors and find and correct errors when they do happen, because they're inevitably going to happen because we are human. So that's our first goal. And accuracy is important because many reasons. One example of accuracy going awry is the journal Pediatrics had to retract a paper because they reported that autism prevalence was up 400% in 10 years, but it was really up 20%. And the errors that led to this were really honest mistakes that could happen to anyone, but we want to kind of prevent those kinds of things. There was some inattention to question wording, some miscoding. I have the specifics here, but the question changed. So it was a lot of different kinds of conditions instead of just one. And then there was a little bit of miscoding of the years. Easy mistake to happen, but embarrassing. Oh, 20 times your rent. That's good. Why should you care? Well, for research to advance, we need accurate information on which we can build and refine theories. Paper retractions decrease the public's trust in scientific research, and that's important. And it can be embarrassing if our papers are retracted or corrected. And while I think it's important that we all embrace that we make mistakes and try to be as transparent about those and fix them as quickly as possible, we want to prevent them as much as possible. Another goal of research is reproducibility and replication. And again, for science to advance, we need to be able to repeat findings. And ideally, you want people to be able to repeat your analyses and get the same findings, or for yourself to be able to repeat your analyses and get the same findings. So reproducibility and replication is really the only thing we can guarantee about a study. We can't guarantee we're going to have interesting results. We definitely can't guarantee they'll be significant, and we can't guarantee that they're correct. Maybe we got a really weird sample and we have this weird finding and it's not truly representative of what's happening on a broader level, but it's what we got. Well, we can't guarantee much, but we can guarantee that with the same data, people can get the same answers if we follow some basic principles of organization and collaboration and transparency. Another reason why you should care about reproducibility is you might have a paper under review for a really long time, and then a reviewer says, oh yeah, these analyses are interesting, but the author should include this one extra control variable. Yikes. How long will it take you to go back and redo that? If you got rid of missing data on the premise that you weren't going to have education, then you have to go back and redo all of your missing data stuff. How are you going to code education? How is that going to affect your other variables? If you imputed data, did you impute it with education? It's just, there's a lot of stuff that could go wrong. So if you have things well organized though, it's much, much quicker for you to go back, find the place to insert that, do a couple of checks to make sure that everything's working as it's supposed to, and get that table with one extra variable in it reproduced quickly. Yeah. Because I'm vague, that is, yep, I'm glad I'm not the only one who's been there. Publishing is also important for reproducibility and replication because more and more journals are requiring authors to share data at source and analysis files. And things need to be organized, and your research team all needs to be on the same page so that when you're publishing your files for other people to look at, it doesn't look like a bunch of different people's files. It looks like some sort of a cohesive plan. The NSF also now asks for a workflow plan. And so how are you going to like store and archive your data? How are you going to make sure that it's accessible to other people? We need to work on that. And then open science. We're all moving toward open science a bit more, where we're sharing our data, we're sharing our script files with one another. And are your files, by script files, I mean the files that you write code in that your software reads. So for Stata, that would be like a .do file. For R, that would be an .r or R markdown file. For SAS, I think that's called a program file. So just the different kinds of files. Are your files ready for other people to look at? And will they reproduce those results? Also, reproducibility is just the right thing to do. We want replication. You know, I know moral arguments don't always go super far, but hey, it's the right thing to do. We want knowledge to accumulate. We want to do better. And then efficiency. That's another goal of collaborative research. We want to spend more time on the work that leads to publications and less time retracing our steps, finding things, redoing work, figuring out what we need to be doing and where we need to be going. So how do we do that? And I have 4 principles that I'll kind of talk through relatively quickly. And then I'll talk about how to implement those principles in more detail. So I'll go over the 4 principles broadly, and then don't worry if I'm going a little bit fast, because I'll break down exactly what you would do to implement those in the following sections. So the 4 principles are planning, organizing, documenting, and preserving. So first, planning. Albert Einstein said something, so it's, you know, gotta be good. If I had an hour to solve a problem, I'd spend 55 minutes thinking about the problem and 5 minutes thinking about the solution. Basically, planning helps you get to where you're going, but you have to think through what you're trying to do. Otherwise, you're going to spin your wheels and kind of keep working on the same things and not getting anywhere. So here's a horrific example I'm embarrassed to show you, but it talks about the importance of team leadership. So I was a 19-year-old undergraduate research assistant, and I was put in charge of the organization of experimental data. I had no business doing this. So there were 2 experiments. Experiment 1, 3 group members, they met 3 times. So we've got 30 groups, 3 people, they meet 3 different occasions. Experiment 2, 2 of the previous 3 group members are in new groups of 3. This doesn't really matter, but basically there's an experiment 1 and an experiment 2. Experiment 1, group IDs, group 12, 13, 14. Sure, why not? That makes sense. All right, now for experiment 2. What? I was like, oh, well, we did numbers, so let's do letters. I'd never done an experimental design before. We like literally made it up that moment. I was like, I don't know how we number this. Letters. Okay. And also, by the way, when I say I was put in charge of organizational data, nobody ever said you're doing the organizational data, just nobody ever gave me rules for what the numbering plans were or anything. And I was like, well, I guess I'll come up with something. And this is what I came up with. Granted, we went back and we fixed it, but man, this was embarrassing. It was a terrible decision. It was very confusing, not well thought out, but what did I know? I was just kind of getting started and figuring it out. So we want to avoid this kind of thing, and we want to lead our team so that they're not coming up with these decisions on the fly that we end up regretting later and having to go back over a lot of our work and figure out what the heck, what was going on. So planning keeps you on track to finish the project and publish your results. It prevents you from wasting time. It keeps you from redoing work and from frustration and unclear expectations. We want research assistants to know exactly what we're expecting of them and to reduce any frustration, much like when we're teaching a class, we want the syllabus to have all of the answers. We need to have some sort of syllabus for our research team so they know exactly what to do. And when they don't know what to do, they know where to go to look for what to do. Tips for planning: resist the urge to just start doing some analyses. This can be really rewarding, but it's often error prone and confusing and can get everybody kind of, just in a tizzy. And we want to avoid that. We want to just take a step back, plan, and move forward. Kind of the marshmallow test of research, just resist. Then planning to plan. I recommend you schedule time with yourself to plan. I schedule time with my RAs in our meetings to say, okay, here's our project. This is what I'm thinking for the timeline. What are you all thinking? This is the naming convention I was thinking for how we'll name our files. By naming convention, I mean, how are we going to name our files? What is our system for that? And we talk through it. And often I find that as project managers, we misestimate the amount of time things take because we don't know often how much time it takes for somebody who's learning this stuff for the first time to do. So checking in and making sure that our plans are reasonable can be really helpful. And all humans underestimate. Yes, that's true. So yes, when you're planning, plan extra time, but limit time for computing. It can be really, especially if you're working on a project alone or with just one other person as you're planning to start doing things. So I recommend if you can just kind of close your software program and just plan in a separate space. It doesn't necessarily not have to be on your computer, but separate from where you're doing that computing, where you're doing that analysis. yeah, how long they think it will take exactly. And then what to plan, what is the end goal? Often I'll just submit to a conference so that I have a deadline to kind of work back from. A special issue of a paper, what are you thinking? What are some timelines of your goals? Make sure that the work is clearly divided. This is what you will do. This is what you will do. This is how we'll get in touch. Naming conventions I'm going to talk about in more detail, but how are we going to name things? How are we going to talk about things? So in a future seminar, I'll get it into the nitty gritty of like, what do you even name your variables? What do you name your files? What do you name your folders? How are you referring to things, just to make sure everyone's on the same page and that organization is clear. So if one person works on a document, you can then go find that document and you don't have to ask them. It just makes sense where the document will be because we all know the same organization. So planning in the large, research questions, data limitations, writing your abstract, figuring out what's happening. Middle, what analyses are we going to do? What is our sample? What sensitivity analyses are we going to do? And small, naming. What tables exactly are we going to have? What are the figures going to look like? And I know there's a workshop on Friday about tables and figures. So part of the planning in the